All right, let's dive straight into the physical realities of hazardous area compliance. In this explainer, we're focusing on a critical yet surprisingly often overlooked physical threat: how exactly we stop explosive gases from taking a free ride on your electrical cables. You know, we spend a massive amount of time classifying zones, Zone 0, Zone 1, Zone 2, and isolating them on paper. But if we aren't incredibly careful with how we run our wiring, we can literally punch holes right through those invisible safety walls.
This completely changes how you might look at a simple cable tray. A cable doesn't just carry electricity across a zone boundary. Because of the pressure differentials between different areas of a facility, a conduit or a cable trench can basically act like a pipe. If you're not careful, it creates an invisible highway for explosive gases to migrate straight from a hazardous process module, say a Zone 1 area, right into an unclassified space, like your accommodation block or a safe electrical equipment room. The IEC standards, specifically IEC 60079-114, are super explicit about this. Precautions absolutely must be taken to prevent the passage of flammable gases or vapors from one area to another.
So how do we actually stop it? Well, that's exactly why cables crossing zone borders must be sealed. You can't just run a cable through a wall and fill the gap with whatever silicone sealant you have lying around. No way. We use gas-tight deck or bulkhead transits, most commonly known as MCT frames. According to maritime and offshore rules like DNV's Electrical Installation Standard, these penetrations through bulkheads and decks must be definitively gas-tight. These are not optional caulking jobs, guys. They are rigorously certified, tested physical barriers that clamp down on each individual cable to ensure absolute zero gas migration. Now let's zoom in from the macro boundary of the facility walls right down to the micro level inside your electrical cabinets. Any junction box housing both intrinsically safe circuits, what we often call XI circuits, and non-intrinsically safe wiring mandates strict separation. According to IEC 1689-7 and DNV rules, these terminals must be separated by an absolute minimum of 50 millimeters, or they have to be divided by an earthed metallic barrier plate. Why? Because intrinsically safe circuits rely on keeping electrical energy so incredibly low that a spark literally can't ignite gas. If a fault on the high-voltage side bridges a tiny gap and dumps energy into your carefully restricted IS loop, your entire safety concept fails instantly. That rigid 50-millimeter physical separation rules out design errors, making sure the cabinet is safe on day one. But here's the thing. The failure mode we're really worried about here isn't usually a design mistake, it's a maintenance mistake. To prevent an exhausted technician from making a fatal error during a 2 a.m. call-out, intrinsically safe terminal strips and their associated cables must also be distinctly color-coded. Under IEC 60079-14, that mandatory color is light blue. This visual cue is crucial. It stops someone from re-terminating a spare core onto the wrong side of the barrier when they're in a massive hurry.
Think of it kind of like a hospital pharmacy. Regular medication, it just sits on ordinary shelves. But controlled, high-risk drugs, those sit behind a physical barrier, in distinctly labeled containers, precisely so a tired night shift pharmacist never grabs the wrong one by accident. Your intrinsically safe terminal strip is that locked, clearly marked, controlled drug shelf. We keep them physically separated and colored light blue because mixing them up isn't just a paperwork error. It is literally introducing a live ignition source straight into a hazardous zone.
Okay, let's do a quick check to see how this plays out in your daily work. Imagine you're doing an inspection. You open a cabinet and find intrinsically safe and non-intrinsically safe terminals sitting only 30 millimeters apart, and there is no earth metallic barrier plate installed between them. Take a second and ask yourself, based on what we just covered from the offshore standards, is this compliant?
The answer is absolutely no. That falls short of the 50-millimeter minimum distance required by IEC 618927, and it completely lacks the earth barrier plate that could serve as a backup alternative. This isn't the kind of thing you just flag as a future punch list item to get around to eventually. This is a critical violation of intrinsic safety separation rules, meaning it absolutely must be corrected before that cabinet ever sees service.
So the crucial takeaway here is that ensuring a safe installation requires a complete, unbroken chain of protection. It starts with the cable itself. Standards mandate that the metallic protective coverings, like the braid or armor, must be properly earthed. Then, as the cable snakes through the facility, it has to pass through certified gas-tight bulkhead transits to stop that gas migration. And finally, when the cable terminates inside the box, we enforce that 50-millimeter terminal segregation and light blue color coding. Every single link in this chain has to be perfect.
All right, so you now know how to physically route cables safely across zone boundaries and perfectly segregate intrinsically safe circuits. But remember,
This entire physical safety chain doesn't actually count until it's proven on paper. This whole system runs on hazardous area classification documents that you'll be producing and reviewing on the job. Which leaves you with one final, pretty provocative question to ask yourself today. If there was an incident at your facility right now, could your documentation definitively prove that every single 50mm gap and gas-tight seal was perfectly installed and maintained? Think about that as we move into our next topic.